We were right again, and not just on one thing, on several of the most important questions this show has been building towards since season 1. If you're just catching up after this video, you should go back and watch the previous video breakdowns I've made on season 4 and a couple of my other videos breaking down how the cycles work, the numbers, and all the other things we've been talking about on this channel. A lot of what's getting confirmed now and in these next couple episodes, we had laid out well in advance. Today, we're going to walk through each of those confirmations methodically, the evidence on screen, and what it means for the mythology and where it points us next. Let's get into it. The first thing I want to establish and talk about is something that I've mentioned in previous videos, but now it's really important to point it out. The man in yellow is far from a person. And the man in yellow itself is simply a costume, or more, it's an identity, one of what I believe are many different identities that a single underlying entity adopts each cycle to embed itself in the town. We've suspected this for a while. For example, in Victor's cycle, it presented as the man in yellow. In this cycle, it's presenting as Sophia. But before Victor's cycle, I believe it was something else. Possibly whatever that slip dress was in the trunk that they found in the caves, the first hint we got at Victor knowing who the man in yellow was. And that's important to talk about. This entity inserts itself as a new identity into each cycle that fits naturally into the social fabric of the town at that time. What this episode confirms is that these aren't random disguises. The entity arrives with purpose, specifically who it wants to access. And in Victor's cycle, it came as a man in yellow to get close to the right people. In this cycle, it came as Sophia to get close to Sarah, which leads us directly into the next section. I said earlier this season that Sophia's move into the house with Sarah was strategic, and this episode completely confirms that. She wanted to be close to Sarah in order to be able to directly manipulate her. And now, by the end of this episode, the moment with the water, this was not a quirk, this was absolutely a test. She was measuring Sarah's threshold, checking whether the control she has over her can continue to be pushed again, and whether Sarah will break again. Based on what we've seen, Sarah most likely will. But the more interesting question here now is, break how and at what cost? Does she do something, or does she refuse and pay the price for that refusal? And this connects to what now has been confirmed. The voices we've talked about both on the radio, Sarah's voices, the seizures that Ethan had, that Elgin had, that Sarah had, the music box, the radio. These are not symptoms that are random or just being generated from within. These are mechanisms of direct external manipulation from the entity. And the entity, whether we call it Sophia or the man in yellow, is the source. This also means we should go back and look carefully at every moment of a seizure, every moment of voices and direct manipulation, and even every moment in the last few episodes where Sophia appeared to pray. We've seen her praying in front of Kenny and others, but this episode gives us reason to believe that those moments were a performance, and what was she actually doing during those moments, or who or what was she manipulating? Now let's talk about Julie, the story walking, and the storyteller arc of the cycles. Now, it's important to really dive into the details of what's actually being discovered and confirmed here, and what I think it actually means for how the show really works and how the reincarnations of this town actually work. As we've discussed in previous videos, it is now pretty much confirmed that every single person in the town is a reincarnation of a past version of someone else, going all the way back to the original town that did the original sacrifice. Now, when it comes to these books that Ethan had, the Grand Gulagog, and all of these adventure storytelling books that seem to uncannily reference things that are happening in the town, that is because, like Julie is kind of saying, but not really, because she doesn't quite understand it yet either, the books are written by someone who was a past resident of the town. They weren't written by outsiders who observed the town or simply someone who had just dreams. They were written by people who were eventually in the cycle, past versions or reincarnations of people currently in the town. That's why the rules they describe work here. That's why the internal logic holds. The author was theorizing from the outside, having dreams just like Tabitha did, but then maybe eventually ended up here and maybe even eventually was in Victor's cycle. And then they were documenting something that actually was real. The question the show is now actively raising is, who is this storyteller? The narrative keeps drawing us towards Ethan, who loves to talk about these stories, and Victor, who draws and tells the story itself. And these are most likely the heavier candidates. Both have unusual access to the shape of the events that are happening, Victor especially. But we'll come back to him in a moment. Now, here's a piece I want to walk through carefully because it ties several seasons together. The bookmarks in the story walking system most likely correspond to the numbers that are being written on the papers that are being left in the bottles on the bottle tree. The numbers were placed there deliberately by someone who understood the system and wanted to preserve these bookmarks or access points to specific moments in the story. And remember the bottle that Boyd found all the way back in season 1? Remember that he had it on him before they went into the tree. This directly led him to the ruins and to Martin. So that itself absolutely was not random. And in my Martin video, I broke down how a lot of the things in the scenes with Martin pointed to exactly what years and what timelines Martin was actually a part of or from. And it matches really well with the pieces of paper that Boyd had removed from the tree. That wasn't random. That bottle was the bookmark placed by someone who knew where it needed them to go. Now, my current read is that a past version of Julie or someone working in concert with her is the one who placed those numbers. The version of the bottle tree with the bookmarks represents the accumulated work of someone trying to leave a map. I don't believe this is Julie herself placing them by traveling through the cycles, but someone else before her who was a storyteller as well and a story walker as well. And now I only want to briefly talk about this without overstating it too much because I think the show is also being careful here too. The golem that Fatima is creating, it may animate and it may not. The more important thing to avoid is assuming it's a straightforward one-for-one where anything created in town can become real. My read here is that there's an additional condition or mechanism we haven't been shown yet. The town has rules, and those rules tend to require something in exchange. Whatever happens with this golem, there is likely a cost or a trigger we don't yet understand. Now let's talk about the ring with the infinity symbol on it. This is the confirmation we've been building toward on this channel. Boyd is experiencing visions from a past self, and crucially, the ring is the artifact connecting those iterations. Just as the bracelet connected Tabitha in her past selves, the pattern is consistent. Each reincarnated person in town has an object, and that object recurs across cycles as the same soul returns in a new body. What this also may confirm is the pairing structure. Everyone in town is reincarnated and they return with a counterpart, either a romantic partner or a familial bond like siblings or parents and a child. The pairings aren't random, they're consistent, and they're cosmically aligned. Boyd and his counterpart, Tabitha and hers, Kenny and his, and so on. This is the mechanism, this is how the cycle works at the soul level. And the big reveal, in my opinion, will be who is connected to who and why and through what mechanism, and if everyone is connected to a child that was sacrificed in the beginning. And now for the biggest reveal of the episode. Victor always knew something was coming and that everything was changing. And everything he does, every word he says has to be read as intentional because he knows more than he's told anyone. We knew since season 2 when Victor reacted to the suitcase in the caves that he had information about something, and now we know was the older entity that was used before the man in yellow. That reaction was a tell. The drawings from Miranda also placed the entity's presence in Victor's cycle, but this episode gives us the full picture. The man in yellow was there the day of the massacre, and through Julie's visions, we now see what he was doing, consuming the bodies, eating the organs. And when Victor found Miranda that morning, the entity was there too, consuming her. Here's what I think this confirms for us. We have always wondered, why do the bodies in the town look the way they do? What are the monsters doing to them, or what happened after the monsters came? And this is finally the answer. The monsters kill, but they kill as a function they're forced to perform. We know Smiley is the one who actually stopped Miranda at the tree. But all they do is they bring this sacrifice. The entity, the man in yellow, Sophia, whatever form it decides to take that cycle, comes after them to feed. The monsters are the instrument, the entity is the one the original deal was made with, and they are sacrificing people to feed it. And now it's time to talk about my theory. And it's just a theory, but a theory on what's really going on in the show and attempting to explain the mythology. Before we get all the big reveals of the next episode that's being hinted at, I would love to explain where my theory currently lands. And if you want more detailed, still check out my previous videos. But for now, let's talk about what I think is really going on here. At some foundational point in the beginning, which I believe is 1506, which would have meant that all the original people from the original deal were some of the first settlers in America, which explains the imagery around the American flag and why everyone who ends up in this town is from America. Now, that group of original people made a deal. They sacrificed children in exchange for immortality to some sort of demon or entity. And with any deal made with the devil, there's always a catch. That deal bound them to this entity, cursing them to exist as its instruments forever, forced to kill, to sacrifice, and to feed it year after year, cycle after cycle. The people in this town are the reincarnated souls of people connected to that original group, the ones who did not take the deal, at least willingly. They return cycle after cycle, drawn back into this game, trying each time to find a way out. The cycle is marked by the return of the two specific souls, likely tied to the last child who died. And here's where it gets interesting. Tabitha consistently returns with 2 children. That can't be a coincidence. We have Ethan, Victor, the boy in white, and the 8th spot on the merry-go-round when there were only 7 children who were sacrificed, and the one that we confirm is sacrificed is a daughter. So in my opinion, that means that the key to all of this is that there is a child who was not properly sacrificed, who survived. That child, or the soul of that child, is the key to why this cycle exists and how it might end. And that's where episode 4 leaves us. Almost everything we've been tracking is now confirmed or deepened. The entity's identity shifting, Sophia's manipulation of Sarah, the voices as direct control, the reincarnation pairings and the cycles and how they truly work, the body consumption of the people who die in town, the original deal and the root of the cycle. The season is pointing toward a huge reveal that should answer almost everything, hopefully in the next episode. And if the pattern holds, the final season will just be about how the characters actually defeat this place, now that they're starting to understand what they're actually dealing with. Now, if you're not subscribed, you might as well do it now. The next episode breakdown will build directly on what we've laid out today. And if you want to go deeper on any of these threads, the links on the earlier season 4 breakdowns and all my videos and theories are below. See you next time.